All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our coffee chat. We're going to go ahead and get started. People will kind of trickle in, but we can start with introductions of our students who are going to be talking to you guys. So they're just going to introduce yourselves and then themselves, and then I'll give like a little spiel about, what to expect during this talk, and what kind of questions we can answer for you. So go ahead, Rana.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rana. I moved to Detroit from New Jersey. For undergrad, I went to a local school in New York City called Hunter College. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but why Wayne State? Well, honestly, my favorite thing about Wayne State is the people. I've met so many amazing people and made so many great friends here. Like the community is just awesome. Like I wouldn't trade it for any other school. Some things I'm involved in at Wayne State are I'm on the board of student orgs. I'm the event and budget chair for BSO. And I'm also involved in Warrior MD ambassadors and CPM, which is like a mentoring for pre-meds. And I'm currently looking to get involved in some research, but yeah, that's all about me.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I came to Detroit from California. I went to UC Santa Barbara and I majored in cell and developmental biology. I chose Wayne State because, like Rana kind of already said, the community here is really amazing. And I also like the school's kind of commitment and dedication to serving the community of Detroit. So that was a huge reason why I chose Wayne. And then at Wayne State, I am involved in the anesthesiology interest group, MD ambassadors. I'm also a peer mentor and I'm doing some research here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria. I'm from East Lansing, Michigan, which is right where Michigan State University is if y'all aren't from Michigan. I went to the University of Virginia, studied in their School of Public Policy, mainly focusing on health policy, and then spent my bridge year before med school in the National Health Corps, which is a branch of AmeriCorps. At Wayne, I'm involved in this group, which is MD Ambassadors. I'm also a part of the Robert Frank Student Run Free Clinic, plant-based nutrition group, a group called Science Policy Detroit, and doing some research as well. As far as why I chose Wayne, I really liked Wayne because, like Olivia mentioned, its dedication to training physicians, like to specifically serve populations of Detroit, really focus on providing great clinical experiences for their students early on. And beyond that, just being in Detroit, you get to see a lot. You get to work in the largest hospitals in the state as a third year. And I've really loved getting to know the city of Detroit a bit better too.
Hi, my name's Huda. I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I went to Michigan State University where I studied human biology, and I also minored in like bioethics. The reason I chose Wayne State is, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I do really admire the connection it has with the community. Not only like how we can like aid the community in terms of clinics, but like also like what we can learn as well from the community, because there's a lot of community workers that like have been working in the community for a while, and like their experiences are like so much greater than anything you can learn like in a classroom. Things that I'm involved in at Wayne, I do MD ambassadors. I also am the secretary and treasurer of the Islamic Medical Student Association. I'm also looking into some research as well. But yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda. So I am a coordinator for the MD Ambassadors, which is this. And I'm from Franklin, Michigan, which is just outside of Metro Detroit, about 20 minutes. I went to U of M and I majored in biochemistry and Spanish. I chose Wayne State because it's in, my home state, around my hometown, and I've come to Detroit a lot growing up. And so I really wanted to go to school in the space that, I kind of grew up near and that I plan to work in. So I hope to stay here in Michigan around the Detroit area. So I really wanted to get to know the patient population and kind of learn in that environment. Plus, I really like the early clinical experience that Wayne State gives me, and the fact that they kind of put our schedule for all 4 years so that we have more clinical time in our 3rd and 4th year, which I thought was really cool. Other things I'm involved in are I'm president of the American Medical Women's Association. I'm also a coordinator for the learning coaches for the clinical skills course. And I think that is it. So basically how this session is going to go is you guys can like raise your hands and ask any questions you want. This is sort of focused on interviewing. So we're just students who are answering your questions. So just keep that in mind. We don't have anything to do with like the admissions decisions or anything. So we're just kind of here to share our experiences and give you advice as to how, you know, we would do things and how we did them that were successful and things such as that. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand. If not, we do have some submitted questions I can go through as well. But it's open to you guys now, so go ahead and have any questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elsa. Thank you so much for sharing your backgrounds. It seems like there are a lot of groups that you're part of. So my question is, how do you prioritize what you're involved in and manage your time, you know, balancing clinical time, studying, and all of the different groups?
I can speak to that first. That's a great question. And I think the answer looks a little different for everybody. The biggest advice I would give is, and this is something I was told by an upperclassman when I first began medical school, but really figure out your priority list, what's most important to you, whether that's getting involved in our clinics or being a part of an interest group for a specialty, and start there and start kind of small. And then there's always going to be time to get more involved as you continue on. But especially like deciding to be a part of the board, depending on the position, can be a bigger time commitment. And so just acknowledging that and realizing what you're applying for, how much time commitment is expected of that position, is going to be most important. And then studying at Wayne, you at least have some protected, like your first block, you won't necessarily have that. You'll be volunteering in the community, but you won't be expected to be a part of an org as formally as a part of its board, because those applications don't come out for like a few months. So like focusing on that time to really figure out how you study, how much time you'll need to study. And then as you progress throughout your time in medical school, you just become a more effective studier and figure out like what hours of the day you work best, what you're doing that's actually turning into success on exams and things like that. So starting small, focusing on your schoolwork, of course, and then adding things slowly and figuring out what's most important for you to get involved is my advice there.
To add on to that, I would also say that if you're getting involved in organizations and different opportunities that you truly like love doing and that you really are interested in, it won't feel like a huge commitment or like you're really struggling to like find time for it, because you'll want to find time for it and you'll also be having a good time while you're doing it. So I'd also just encourage that whatever you get involved in, make sure it's something that you really are passionate about and that, you know, it's something that you really want to be doing.
All right. Cool. So we can go ahead and ask Bailey, you can ask your question. Also, let me know if I mispronounce anyone's name.
Oh, no. No, yeah, that's good. Sorry, I'm walking, so if the audio is bad. I had 2 questions. One, I'm like very into like mental health advocacy, and I was wondering if, sorry, I'm out of breath, Wayne State had any good resources. And then I just have like a second question for in interviews. Did you kind of focus on, like, did you do a lot of research for the school to show how your values aligned with the program, or did you more just like kind of talk about yourself? Like, how did you kind of prepare for the interview? Thank you.
I can speak a little bit about how I prepared for the interview. I don't know much about the mental health. It's not really my specialty, but I can speak to the second question that you asked. In terms of preparing for interviews, you definitely want to check out the website. You want to check out like some of the student orgs that are in the school that you're interviewing for. So for example, Wayne, we have a lot of student orgs. So you want to look at like things that you're interested in, speak to some of that, because you will be asked why Wayne. you will be asked in any interview why that school. So you want to make sure you have solid reasons as to why you choose that school. So if it's like, you know, I like the student orgs in the school, or like, you know, I like the opportunity that it gives me to like have early clinical exposure, or whatever it is that you resonate with, check out the website, find reasons, strong reasons, because you will have to speak about them for sure.
I'll jump off what Lana said pretty much. Like, I definitely agree. Looking into why specifically you want to go to Wayne and why you want to go to any school and why you want to be a doctor is definitely something that you will have to talk about in your interview. And then make sure it's personalized in the sense of like, let's say you do Google and go on like the Wayne School of Medicine website. Don't just like read off like, oh, I like that in first year you do this. But like, if you can apply it to then how, like, let's say you specifically want to talk about the curriculum, if you can then apply it to like how you learn. Like, for example, if you like how Wayne does like group activities, and you can like relate it to like how you work better in groups and how that's how you learn, and how like you like how everyone comes with their own experiences, and then that way you can gain so much from that, like making it personalized to yourself is very important. And then again, I don't know much about how you can go into mental health advocacy, but like I'm sure we have so many like interest groups, so many like activities, so many volunteering opportunities that like if that's something you wanted to do within your time here, that's definitely something that would be available. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question in the chat that I'll go ahead and ask for our panelists. It says, were there any significant differences you noticed when interviewing with current students versus faculty?
I can answer this one. So I'm pretty sure most people had like pretty different experiences, even like amongst like faculty interviews, because you know, like there's just such a diverse array of people, you don't know like who you're gonna get. But for me personally, I found that my faculty interview was much more kind of informal and casual. We really were just like had a conversation and talked. It did not feel like an interview really. We were just kind of chatting. My student interview was a little bit more like formal and kind of more interview like. They asked about like my accomplishments, you know, the organizations that I had been involved in. So yeah, I think it does kind of depend though on, you know, who you get for your faculty interviewer and who you get for your student interviewer, but that was my experience.
Yeah, I'll kind of say the same thing, kind of like Olivia said. I actually have interviewed twice because I reapplied. And I remember it was very different both times. And so that kind of speaks to, it really depends on who is interviewing you. So the first time, my student interviewer was just kind of like, give me an elevator speech, sorry, excuse me, and kind of just talk about, you know, yourself. And then we kind of talked a little bit more like as a conversation. Whereas the second time, my student interviewer was more asking different questions about like how I would, you know, deal with some ethical dilemmas, or how would I do like certain situations or whatever. So it can be very different, kind of just depends on what they decide to focus on. So I would just say be prepared for kind of all of those things. And just kind of like general advice for interviewing, regardless of like who you're talking to. Make sure you're emphasizing things and talking about things that maybe weren't on your application, or going further and expanding on the things that were on your application, because all of the people who are interviewing you know your application and have read it or looked through it. So it's really good to, you can still mention all the things on your application, but maybe make those parts a little more brief, and then expand on things that you didn't get to talk about in your application, or just give more detail, because that's the stuff that they'll remember more, because they've already kind of read through the things you put on your application. So that's something to think about. Does any of our panelists have anything else to add to this one?
I will add that my student interview and my faculty interview were very similar. It almost felt like they were both conversational yet still formal at the same time. So it was more like ask a question, get an answer, ask a question, get an answer in that format. So yeah, so I think definitely be prepared for the basic interview questions that you get, like why Wayne State, why medicine, you know, what's your clinical experience like? Do you have research experience? I got asked all these things. So definitely prepare for those kinds of things in both.
Okay, awesome. We can go to our next question. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Ridhika?
Ridhika, yes, you got it.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, my question was that I know that Wayne State values a lot of community service and serving the underserved, but is there a specific type of volunteering service that is valued more or would help the applications more in terms of, like, let's say, if we're tutoring or we're helping homeless people or anything of that sort?
I wouldn't say like certain experiences are valued more, but I definitely say when people ask me like, oh, should I be doing this instead of that? Or should I like, maybe like I should like do this on my app? I definitely would say that like, it's not about exactly what you do, although what you do is very, very important. It's about how you talk about what you did and how it meant to you specifically, in the sense of, let's say you could be tutoring refugees, right? And you could be like, oh yeah, I tutor refugees. That's something I do like on Saturday. That's something like someone would say, let's say about something they did. But if you talk about like, these are my experiences with this population, this is how I want to help this patient population, this is what I want to do, this is how I serve them in this way, and this is what I specifically, my favorite thing is when people talk about what they learn from like communities, like what they learn from their experiences. Like, this is what I learned. I feel like that matters more than just like doing a blank activity. But,
Right. Okay. And I have a question for Olivia. I think you mentioned that you were a California applicant. So how would you say that your application, or how did your interview go in terms of being out of state?
For myself, I think people definitely ask the question like, why Wayne, like why Detroit? Because I was not from Michigan. So I would just be prepared for like those kinds of questions, like, you know, like you're not from here, like why are you like applying here? What about this school draws you to us? Etc. So I would just be prepared to answer those questions.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, going off that, what Olivia said, I was also out of state, and I definitely got asked why Detroit. So maybe, you know, you don't have to know like details or specifics of like what's in Detroit, but definitely like look up and learn a little bit more about the city. So when I got asked that, I was like, well, you know, I grew up in an urban area. So like, and I grew up like in an area that was underserved. So I kind of want to serve the same area, the same type of area. So if you have something like that that you can talk about, that would be good.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Matthew, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking your time out of your day and talking to us and giving us some advice. Thank you. So my question is so with most of the interviews being virtual nowadays, what does interview day look like? And do you have any tips for virtual interviews?
there's a lot of like breakout rooms. I love virtual interviews. I feel like it allows you to like do more interviews in places where you wouldn't have done an interview. Like, let's say if you're in California, it will allow you to like go to Michigan virtually. But breakout rooms, make sure that you have access to like good Wi-Fi that day. Something I always ask like other people who did do like interviews at like the school before me, I'm like, oh, like, did you have to go to this breakout room and then did they send you to a breakout room, or did you have to like click to go to that breakout room and remember your number? But my personal experience with Wayne, like their Zoom and like the interview day went very smoothly for me. I just was sent in where I needed to be at the times where I need to be there. And there's times when it is awkward, like for example, with the MMIs, like you sit down and you like read a prompt before you like talk to them, and like you have that time to look at the prompt. So like that's your time to like look, even though they're there, right there on the Zoom with you. But just like be calm, like it's okay, everything will go smoothly. But yeah, that's it.
To add to that, I would like Huda said, there can be moments where you feel there's a silence, and usually it's just because the interviewer is giving you that second to make sure you're completely done before they move on or ask a follow-up question. And so having like one good piece of advice might be, if you have an answer to a question that you routinely expect, like why Wayne State, or what draws you to Detroit, or why medicine, those kind of answers, practicing them out loud can be helpful, because instead of trailing off your answer, which I know is something I tend to do when I speak just casually, but having like a nice wrap up and closing can make those transitions a lot easier. But again, not every one of those is avoidable. So just being a little comfortable and being ready to put on like your nice, polite, smiling face, letting them know like you're done, and being comfortable in that second of silence there can be helpful too.
Something I can add is like for virtual interviews, it is awkward, like looking at the camera, like you don't know sometimes where to look. So what you can do, what I did was I practiced a lot. So I got on Zoom with like one of my friends and I had her ask me questions and I practiced like responses. Like I practiced just speaking and being comfortable speaking on camera, because it's kind of weird. But if you've done it multiple times, then on interview day, when you're doing it with an interviewer, you're gonna like feel a lot more comfortable. So that's definitely something I recommend.
Yeah, and then just like a little note of advice. I think it was during the MMIs, there was like a little glitch in my interview and they got it figured out really quick, and it didn't like, I didn't have as much time to say anything, but it didn't like hurt anything in my application or my interview or anything. So like if something does happen, like don't freak out. Like they'll work with you and work it out. And it won't like negatively impact like your interview. So that's just like another thing to keep in mind. Like they know sometimes things happen, or like the audio wouldn't connect or whatever. So just like it'll be fine. They're not gonna like knock you down because you had like a little blip in the time. So just keep that in mind too, because I know that can be really nerve-wracking when you're interviewing, and especially when it's online. Yeah.
And adding to that, if there is a glitch or an issue, just know, and it's not on your end, and even if it is on your end, it can be actually a great way to show how you manage stressful situations if you are able to maintain calm. And then if the glitch is resolved, like being able to jump back into your interview with like a calm and as if like almost nothing had happened kind of thing too. So just realize like those are great times to show strengths in your personality as well.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You have something to say?
I was just saying thank you so much for the advice.
Oh.
Thank you.
Sure. I just want to add something that happened on my interview day. I couldn't figure out how to do the MMIs. It wasn't showing up for me. And so I was like, it took time out of my like, because they give you a certain amount of time to do the MMI. And because I couldn't figure it out in the beginning and it wasn't showing up, I had less time. And she was really, really nice about like giving me a little bit more time. So don't worry, if there is a glitch, they will work it out for you. So I wouldn't stress about it too much.
All right, so I have a question in the chat. So in terms of an elevator pitch, how do you prepare for that without being too redundant? And are there certain elements you made a point to include when answering that question? I guess for me, when I do like an elevator pitch, I do like touch on all the things that I think were important in my application, in terms of kind of talking about like what I did in my gap years, things that I changed at being a reapplicant, especially the second time. I talked about things that were different in my application, just really quick, just to kind of give that reminder. And then I would also talk about things that like aren't necessarily related to like school or anything, like things I'm interested in, just adding something like unique about yourself, even if it doesn't have to do with like you being, volunteering or just saying, oh, I, you know, do all these things on the weekends, like as a hobby or whatever. Like just adding something personal like that can be like a good touch. And it can even like help you find some common ground with an interviewer and you guys can kind of talk about that topic. And even though it's not like you selling yourself based on what you've done, it's a good way to just like show that you have other interests and that you think those things are important in your life, and it helps shows like your work-life balance and things like that. That is something that they also will ask you sometimes, like, what do you do when you're stressed out, or how do you balance, school and living life and stuff. So things like that can also just be a good little thing to throw in, just to make the interview a little bit more personal, and show kind of more like you as a person. Yeah, so that's just what I did. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I remember doing something slightly similar in the sense of like I would also like give a short like, oh, just like a little snippet of like me as a student, and then I would just like talk about myself. I remember having an interview a little bit after Thanksgiving, and like during Thanksgiving, me and my sister were learning how to longboard, and I remember talking about that. I was so bad. I was so bad at it. And then also I talked about like after the MCAT, I got into like painting again, which is something that I did like in like as a child and like in high school, which I like kind of let go of in college. Like after the MCAT, I bought like watercolors, and then I remember some interviews being like, "Oh, let me see your watercolors." So then I grab my sketchbook and be like, "Oh, like this is what I drew." But yeah, and it's like fun. It's personable. Like I know everyone picked up a fun hobby during COVID, like something to do when you were stuck in the house, not being able to do anything else. So that's something I talked about personally. But
All right. We have another question in the chat. Also, guys, don't feel shy. Like, raise your hand if you want to ask questions out. That's also great. But I'll go to the chat questions while we don't have any questions from you guys. So this one is, during the interview, is there a possibility of being asked questions regarding opinions of healthcare policy?
I don't remember being asked specifically about healthcare policy. I remember bringing it up. I don't know why. Mostly because like I personally have opinions on like accessibility of healthcare and the for-profit healthcare system, which I know some people say like, oh, that's like a touchy thing to bring up in like an interview, but like that's something I personally care about. And if it's like something that like let's say that day my interview is not a fan of, like I'll just take like the L on that one. But I don't remember specifically being asked about that. But.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I don't think, I mean, we can't speak to what you're going to be asked. We can just speak to what we were asked. But I don't remember anyone I've talked to saying that they were asked anything specific questions about like, what do you think of this policy? Or, I mean, they don't necessarily expect you to be like experts on that kind of stuff. So I don't think they're going to throw that curveball at you. That's kind of an odd. They really want to know about you and like your experiences and what things you're going to bring to the class and to the school and what kind of things you want to get out of the school. That's kind of like the main things they're going to focus on. If they do ask you kind of questions, I guess I did get a lot of questions about ethics in my student interview. That's just what they wanted to focus on with the second time I interviewed. So the first time they just wanted to know about me, but the second time they chose to ask me a lot of questions about ethics. And so that's more like your opinion on, what do you do in a situation where, you see another student doing something that you don't think they should be doing, or what would like not like super crazy ethics questions like what do you do, in like a medical setting. It's just sort of like an MMI kind of situation, but like from an ethical perspective. That was like, I guess the most kind of, for me, that was like the most curveball-y question I got. It wasn't gonna be like on policy or anything, so I wouldn't be too worried about that kind of stuff. Does anyone else have anything to add, or should I move on? Cool. Sahil, you can go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sahil. I know some of you have already kind of talked about the MMI already, but how did you guys go about preparing for that section specifically? And what are some like the different scenarios that you're presented with? Is it just like ethical based questions or hypotheticals, or is it like a team working thing? Or is it like a mix of both? Yeah.
So for my MMIs to prepare, I remember I like looked up MMI examples online, just get an idea of like what kinds of questions I might be asked, like what kind of ethical scenarios you might be placed into, and just kind of start like brainstorming like how you might answer those, like, what are some, good answers and explanations. In terms of the kinds of MMIs that I had, I think they were mostly just like you were like placed in a scenario. It was like kind of like an ethical dilemma. And then, how do you go about navigating that? Like, what do you do? How do you resolve it? And I remember mine were not like all healthcare related. Like I had some that were like just completely random, like ethical dilemmas. I don't remember like specifically what my interview questions were though.
Going off what Olivia said, there are great YouTube videos also that you can watch. I watched a lot of those before my interview, and they're basically just like MMI scenarios and like how people answer them. So you can get an idea of like what like kinds of answers they're looking for, like what kinds of traits or like things that they expect from you. And then after watching those YouTube videos, I would just like go for walks and like record myself. Like I would just record myself and then listen back and like see kind of like how I sound. That's very important because a lot of times we do like ramble a lot and we don't focus on what's being asked. So definitely practice if you can.
Amanda, did you want to say something? Okay. I really liked MMIs. I think because I'm also like at the time I was a bioethics minor, so I love anything ethical and any ethical situation. But I did something similar. Like I Googled and I look at questions, and after a while you do start noticing like a pattern or like an underlying theme, I guess is a better word. Like they usually look for like two things I noticed, and it's like empathy and problem solving. So those are two qualities they like look for in an MMI. So like empathizing with the situation, you might get a situation where like, oh, like something happened, and like you have to like empathize with like in that situation, or like this happened, that happened, and then now you have to figure out a solution, or like what they consider, like what you would consider a solution. But that's what I've noticed when I was like practicing my MMIs.
And just kind of a noted advice. So it's kind of, they'll ask you the first question about the scenario, and ask you kind of explain what would you do in the situation. So just kind of give like your little spiel, and then don't feel like you have to do all 5 minutes, or I think it's 5 minutes that you get to talk, because they may have some follow-up questions. If there are things that you didn't touch on, they want to know more about like what you do. But also, even if you do finish a little early and they don't have any more questions, like don't let that throw you off, because they're just kind of going to sit there in silence, and that can be a bit awkward. But it's not really important like the amount of things you say, it's more like the quality of what you say. So if you feel like you've explained, the whole situation and what you would do in a good way, like don't feel like you have to keep going on about it. And also another thing just to note is they will like they're not going to engage as much in terms of conversation like as you would get in a different interview, like a student interview or a faculty interview. They're really just listening to you. They're not going to like be like, oh, I did that, or like that's something I would. They wouldn't like, they're not going to like conversationalize it with you. They're just kind of going to like listen, like that's what they're supposed to do. So it might be kind of like you feel like you're saying something wrong. I remember being like, they're really not reacting to what I'm saying. Like, am I saying the wrong thing? But that's just how they're supposed to do it. So don't feel like them keeping a straight face or whatever is like means you're doing it wrong. Like you're fine. That was just something that kind of threw me off. And the first time I interviewed, the first cycle I applied. So just keep that in mind too. That's good to know. Cool.
Also, just one more thing. you might feel like you messed it up after, like you'll feel like you like, oh my God, did I say the wrong thing? Like, did I mess it up? And you'll get like, but at the end of the day, you really can't mess it up because it's about what you think and how you would react. And as long as, like what Huda said, as long as you respond with empathy and you really like think about, how the other person may feel in the situation and like kind of like look at the bigger picture, you should be fine. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
All right. Go ahead, Disha.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences. So I have two questions. The first one is, what kind of is the timeline like of the day of the interviews? Like, especially, so I'm from California. So if like interviews start at 8, so like California residents should be ready at like 5 a.m. to be, their best selves. And is there like a specific, like, does everyone do like faculty interviews and then like student interviews and then MMI? Like, is there a structure that way? So that's the first question I have. And then I don't know if the second one is just kind of what you guys did to prepare for like pre-interview jitters or like to kind of shake it off a little bit before you started the interview. So those are my two questions.
So for the exact timing, that's something that probably the admissions staff could help answer. I was interviewing from California and I remember it being early, but not like 5 o'clock in the morning early, like maybe like 7 in the morning or something like that for you. That's what I recall. In terms of kind of preparing to like get in that interview headspace, one thing that definitely helps me is kind of like visualization. So like the day before, the night before, even like in the week leading up to the interview, just like imagine yourself in that interview setting, like answering questions and like doing well. And just kind of like imagining yourself doing that and like being capable of like succeeding and interviewing well will help you actually do it on that day. And then just like your other basic exercises, like if you're like feeling really nervous or like your heart rate is going through the roof, just like some deep breaths, like kind of centering yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, oh, Don just put it in the chat, but I think that I remember us being able to choose times, like when you choose your day, you can also choose like morning or afternoon, in terms of the interviewing time. And then also there were like different, I can't remember if we chose the different options or if you were assigned it, but everyone does it in a different order. Like you might do faculty student MMI or MMI student faculty because they want to like do different people like at the same time doing all their interviews, So I feel like I remember choosing which order I did it in, but it might be different this time, but you will do it in different order than everyone else. So that's just something to know. Can you remind us of your second question, Nisha?
Oh yeah, I guess I was just wondering like what you guys did to kind of prepare or like get over like pre-interview jitters or like kind of calm yourself down or any of that.
I did like square breathing. What's it called? So like I'd exhale for 7 seconds, hold, inhale for 7 seconds, hold, and then I repeat that. I learned that like for the MCAT, and that really helps me like calm down. And then also just like enjoying the evening before, like the evening before I wouldn't prep. Like the day before I would, just because I was neurotic, but the evening before I would never prep. And then like rewarding yourself after. Definitely like in terms of self-care, like even if you felt like you didn't do well, like getting ice cream after, hanging out with friends after, because like you either way, you had an interview, they chose you, they see something great in you, and then at that point, once you do your interview, it's out of your hands. So that's what I told myself. I'm like, it's out of my hands. Now I just reward myself and I just wait. But yeah.
One other thing, if you find yourself feeling flustered or stressed during the actual interview. I think you can take advantage of, because they're virtual, is like finding a spot like on your wall behind your computer screen, or just like knowing you're in your room and putting your feet on the floor and just feeling like you can take that second to recenter. Know that whatever you said, even in the most immediate past, has already been said, and all you can control is like the words you're going to say to finish out the interview. And so just taking a second to know, like, okay, you're still in your own space. Hopefully that's a comforting space for you. You're not in their office or some weird new school you've never been to. So take advantage of that because they're virtual this year.
Awesome. Bailey, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, sorry, I was having trouble getting off mute. My question's for Amanda. I'm a re-applicant as well, so I was just wondering if was there anything you did or like emphasized on your second time around that you did differently than your first time that you think maybe like helped you be more successful, or like any tips for a re-applicant in the process?
Yeah. So when I applied the first time, I felt like I had a decent application, but there were areas that I was like missing experiences in, like clinical area. And I also like retook the MCAT just to increase like my score and stuff. So the things that I focused on the second time I applied to kind of like emphasize were the things that I did that, improved my application. So I scribed in my time between, and then I also did a master's in public health and I retook the MCAT. So I kind of took those experiences and emphasized them on my application as well as in my interview, while also still like showcasing the things I did before that were important, like doing AmeriCorps for volunteering, and then also throughout my undergrad doing research and stuff. So I would just say make like all the things you've done in your like before like your first application, those are so important because I'm sure they were like, good things to have on your application. So don't forget about those, but definitely really talk about the things that you've changed this time, because most schools, if you're applying the second time to the same school, like they know you're a reapplicant. So they are kind of looking for you to be like, well, this is, how I improved my application. And just kind of showing that you are working hard to get into medical school because this is what you want to do. And it also helps kind of emphasize that like you're reapplying because this is your path and this is what you want to do. Because applying to medical school at all is just like a whole mess of stress and a lot of time and stuff. So no one's gonna, they know you aren't reapplying just to reapply, but it's just good to emphasize that like this is like what you're gonna do, and just kind of be confident that this is the right career for you. And they like that, knowing that you're going to stick through medical school, because there are issues with people dropping out and stuff. So that's just like what I did, kind of just emphasizing my new strengths and stuff.
Building off that can go for any application interview, I think, because for example, as someone who took a year in between undergrad and med school, I had started like my service year at the end of the summer. And so I hadn't had an opportunity to write about it on my application because I hadn't begun it yet. So then in the interview, I really took that time to explain what I was doing in the moment. So if anything's really changed since you applied, or you've started new courses, started new research, started a new job or a new project, really try and find time to expound on that, because it shows, like Amanda said in the past, they have your application, they know what you've written before. It's great to talk about that, but if there's anything else you can add, then that can make you stand out too.
Also, I just want to add that the interview is also a good space to talk about like weaknesses. So I got thrown off in my interview because I was asked about some C's that I had on my transcript. I didn't expect that, but I think that's a good place and a good opportunity to like talk about like why you have these grades, how you grew from them, like what you learned, like what you've done differently. So these are really important things that like you want to talk about and you want to say. So if the reason that you were a reapplicant is, for example, the MCAT or something like that, or like you strengthened your GPA, definitely talk about that, because they want to see growth and they want to see change and they want to see like how you like overcame something. So that's really important.
Did you have a question, Ritika, or did it get answered?
No, both Victoria and Rana kind of answered my question. So thank you.
Cool. All right. We have kind of a question in the chat that we didn't totally touch on. It's what do you think stood out most about your application to lead to an interview? So in terms of experiences, qualities, anything. I feel like this is kind of a hard question because we don't really know why we got chose to be interviewed. It's kind of like, I think for me, it was like the well-roundedness of my application, I think, the second time for sure, because I had 3 years between undergrad and now starting medical school. So I had a lot of time to do, a little bit of everything, which kind of helped me. So I had clinical experience, I had research experience, volunteering. I had more education. So I had like a lot of time to get all that, but I think that having a well-rounded application and having kind of experiences in all those like different parts was good. I also think my personal statement made me interested. I mean, I don't want to sound, but I think in my personal statement, I talked about things that you like I talked about doing ballet and how I, dance with professional companies and things, which is like a unique aspect that not a lot of people can talk about. So I think just having something like unique about yourself that like kind of like a fun fact kind of idea can be like a good attention grabbing situation. And then, maybe they'll, like that in addition to all the important things on your application, of course. But that's my best guess. So.
I'm going to jump in real quick and go off of what Amanda said, but I just want to emphasize that like your stats are not everything. This is something that I get asked a lot from pre-meds, like, like what were your stats? Like what stats do they look for? And I want to like come out and say like my stats were not the highest at all. Like they were very, very average. Some people may even say below average, but what I did have was a lot of like volunteering experience, a lot of the things that Wayne looks for. So like service is really important to them. So like you have a lot of service, they'll appreciate that. And also what Amanda said about your personal statement, that is your opportunity to like shine and like show who you are. So if your stats are not the highest, you can still overcome that. It's not the end of the world. But definitely show who you are through your personal statement and the activities that you choose.
I think this might just be another general interviewing tip, but being able to integrate your experiences and what you've chosen to dedicate your time to leading up to med school in almost like telling a story and kind of being able to show like who you are as an individual, what you hope to do with a medical degree, as a combination of everything you've chosen to spend time on and put energy into. I think they really look for that and look for like more of a complete story. And you don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to see 10 years into the future or what kind of doctor you want to be or anything like that. But they're really looking for who are you as a person? Are you going to fit the school culture? Are you going to fit in with the types of students they want to attract to the school? And then get your medical degree and continue on like with whatever path you're kind of building for yourself. So I think trying to tell the story of who you are through your experiences is going to be really important too.
And also like, don't be afraid of the things on your application that you think are, maybe not as helpful to getting into medical school. Like Rana was talking about her grades. I had some grades that weren't, necessarily what, I thought was great. But those things, don't think of them as like something that's going to bring your application down. Think of them as opportunities for you to explain like how you've learned and grown from those experiences. Because the interviews really like when you talk about, like when they ask you those questions, they don't want to hear like, oh, well, I just had a hard semester. They want to hear you say, well, I had a lot going on, but through that I learned, how to manage my time better and focus on things that were important and that kind of thing. They want to hear those things. So those are also opportunities, even though they might be like weaknesses, they're opportunities to kind of show, who you are and how you adapt and how you will succeed in medical school. Because that's an important aspect of what the school's looking for. They want to make sure that you can handle the stress of school. When you start your first year, it's a lot of things like all at once, and it can be very stressful and a lot to take on. So they just want to hear that you're adaptable and that you're able to, grow from, pitfalls and stuff. That's like a really important skill to have. So just having that opportunity to share that can even be a good thing. So don't get thrown off by those questions asking like, why did you have this? That might not be as good. Like use that as an opportunity to expand on your personal qualities and things. Yeah, someone asked about tours in person. We do have tours going on, and Dawn kind of answered in the chat. But once you're interviewed, we can give you a tour in person, essentially. The answer to that. Any other questions? I don't have any more in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions? Maybe one or two more before we go. I can pull from my other list. Let me see.
Amanda, I had a question that's similar to one that was posted in the chat.
Okay.
About any recommendations on what we should send, as a way to strengthen our application, maybe updates through the portal.
I think I'll speak to this because I did send an update when I was applying. I think a good time to send an update is if you have something really significant. Like I had applied without shadowing. And so I sent an update to my school saying, hey, listen, I know I applied without shadowing. It was COVID, but here, like I started shadowing, So I thought that was significant enough to send as an update. Also, a good time to send an update is if you get an interview and you're on the wait list, because that might be something that, they'll look at and it may help you get off the wait list. Also, some people send like letter of intent or letter of interest. So those are also things that you can do. Some schools accept them, some schools don't. Wayne does, because I did send one to them. So it just depends on like if you're on the wait list or whatever, but I think they do take that into account.
Yeah, I did the same thing as Rana, where I sent I was still in my master's program, so I sent my grades that were good. Well, I sent my grades, and that was helpful in terms of like between the interview and when I got in, because I did have like, I think I interviewed like early in the process, so it took like, and then I got like waitlisted, and so I was like, well, let me keep like reminding them that I'm really interested and that I'm doing good things. So if you have like stuff like that, you can always send them. That's really good. Or like I got an internship, so I was like, oh, I'm doing this internship in health data, like blah blah blah. So it's always a good thing to kind of give them an update, but don't just like, I guess like it has to be something that like they'll want to read. You don't want to just keep bothering them with like, oh, I'm here, like let me off the wait list. You want it to be like significant things that you've been doing, as well as like a letter of intent or something like that. Those are like important things to do. All right, we probably have time. We'll see hopefully both questions. So go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, hey, so what has been the hardest part of medical school so far, and what has been your most favorite part?
I think one of the hard things for me was I took a gap year also. And during that time, I was working like a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday job. So I got really used to having like my evenings all to myself and my weekends were completely free, whatever I wanted to do. And so coming back into the world of school and being a student, it was really hard kind of losing that autonomy over your time and kind of like the work that never ends or the studying that never ends. So that was kind of tough for me. But the best part has been like meeting all of our wonderful classmates. Like we have such a great class, getting involved in things that you're like really excited and passionate about, and just like learning about medicine. Like the human body is so cool, the physiology, the pathophysiology. Like I think that's kind of why we're all here. Because we love medicine and helping people. And so being able to actually be here and do that has been really rewarding.
Yeah, for me, the hardest thing that happened with medical school is like when I started and kind of even throughout this second year I've started, I've had a lot of like family things happening, which can be really, really stressful on top of school. Something that you don't really think about is that, you're like, okay, I'm going to medical school. I have all my time to dedicate. It'll be good. But then you don't realize like things will happen in your life where you're gonna have to like figure out, how to balance your time. I had to go help out with my grandparents. They had to move into assisted living. It was a whole thing. And so having to take up like a huge chunk of my time out of studying and focusing on medical school to do all that and help support my family was like a really difficult thing. And so that was probably like the hardest thing is just like balancing when things happen like that. Trying to figure out like, oh, I have an exam this week. And of course, this week, like this crazy thing happened. I have to go like help, whatever. So that can be really stressful, but just like remember that, you know, your life is important, your like mental health is important, like prioritize those things as well. Because even if like you have an exam that does not go well, there are always ways to, come back from that, continue on, get help from students and other like faculty and stuff. They're always there for you. So that's just like something to remember.
I would say one of the hardest things is like just like the imposter syndrome that you might feel in the sense of like you're like, okay, like you've gone through so much. You applied to med school, now you're in med school, and then you still are like, am I good enough? Like everyone around me is so much better than me, so much smarter than me, so much everything than me. So it's hard to be like, oh, like I deserve this position, or I would be I'd be an amazing doctor, or I'm like this and that. But then like thinking about where you've come from and like where you are now, and like I don't know, it's still hard because like you still experience it, but like just like rationalizing everything you've gone through to be in this position, and the fact that you are in this position means that you are a capable enough person to become a physician, I think has helped me with that. And then something good I would say is like just friends you make along the way, the people that you cry about when like everything is going wrong. But and then also sometimes when you learn something new and then like you make that connection about something you learn, you're like, oh my God, this all makes sense. That's also a feeling that never gets any better. But
I just want to add that like med school is really, really, really hard. I don't think I personally was prepared for how hard it was. You kind of get told like, yeah, med school is hard or whatever. It's like drinking out of a fire hose, but until you experience it, I don't think you will fully imagine like how hard it is, but it does get better. Like in the beginning, you're going to be so overwhelmed because there's so much to do. You have so many different classes and like exams like hit you and you have so much information that you need to memorize. But then once you get like more adjusted, it becomes better. So, I like, yeah, you can do it for sure.
All right. So I think that's about time. I hope you guys found this helpful. Feel free to reach out with any other questions. I'll put my email in the chat. If the other ambassadors want to do that too, they're welcome. But I hope you guys found this helpful. Just good luck on your interviews. Don't be too nervous. You'll be fine. We all made it here. You'll be fine. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.